We have a recruiting insider on the show. You know him. What did he think of the Badgers 2025 recruiting class? Next, Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off. Today, we're talking the schedule released. What does Brian Smith think the Badgers' ceiling is maybe? How can they do next year? We're going to talk about the Jeff Grimes hire. But first, the 2025 recruiting class. I've been waiting to get Brian Smith on to talk about it. Brian Smith, the Locked On, our recruiting insider here, knows everything, the ins and outs of college football recruiting. So the Badgers finished 25th in the composite, Brian, coming off a 5-7 season. What are your general thoughts on this recruiting class?
It's better than I thought as I go back through it from a couple of perspectives. There's still some concerns that I have that are kind of typical to Wisconsin, which means, the portal is going to have to be good for them. But right off the bat, I think that the University of Wisconsin needs to up your salary for helping them with the D-line recruiting. I mean, you did a good job this year.
Yep. Ryan.
It's the best D-line class they've signed in my lifetime that I know of, in terms of length, athleticism, natural size, beating teams that they have to beat to escalate the football program, all those things. So if you take nothing else from this podcast away today, long term, D-linemen, even at Bama, Georgia, don't make a ton of impact usually. Wisconsin's in a better situation. Now they got to stack classes, but this is the norm. You need to get 6'6", 260 guys and up that Michigan and other schools wanted. That's the objective, and they're starting to do that. Also, I was looking at the secondary again. They got some kids from some private schools, Providence Day, and these other private schools around the country, Morgan Park in Chicago, that are 6'1", 6'2". These are the kinds of kids they had at Cincinnati, and they hit. Now, some of them they got last year, one or two already left or whatever. That's the norm. Corner, it's going to be a high, either yes or no. There won't be a lot of middle ground. Kids either will fit in or they won't, but that's what you got to get, because the 5-star kid's still going to go to Bama, Georgia, LSU. So Wisconsin takes 2 or 3 of those a year. They're fine. Also, like this young safety they got from in-state. They got another kid like that. They always have one of those guys that ends up being a starter at Wisconsin. That's a good player. O-line, they got some traditional guys, so that's good. Quarterback, they got a kid that I know. I'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But overall, the class is pretty solid. The one spot that I'm like, okay, where are they? It is not going to be a shock to most Wisconsin fans. Where are the upper echelon wide receivers? And I'm not saying that's a shock to you or anybody else, but at some point, it's got to give. You're not going to escalate your football program if you don't get some guys at wide receiver that aren't just good, but that the other team has to scheme against. Hilton's a good player. Don't get me wrong. And his daddy was a hell of a player for the Colts. But how do you sign one guy when you need 3? That's my concern. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the DBs they signed ends up playing receiver or something. They're going to have to throw down a bunch of cash in the portal, which is not their style, or they're going to be pedestrian again next year.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. I want to get into some of the good stuff you talked about, but the Badgers signed one receiver last year in Conberry Johnson, a slot guy. One receiver this year, Eugene Hilton Jr., about more of a boundary guy, but 2 receivers in 2 classes. There was a couple PWOs mixed in there, but I don't know if you'd find another Power 4 program that has 2.
I don't know if you'd find an FBS program with they're terrible at recruiting receiver until otherwise proven. They just are. The numbers are god awful. That's on the coaching staff. There's just no nice way to say that. It's still a Big Ten program. They've been to the Rose Bowl in the last, how hard can it be to get one kid that can fly besides just the local kid, Indianapolis, Chicago or something? How do they not get one kid from Fort Lauderdale or Dallas or San Francisco or New York, greater New York? I'm just shocked by that. Are they that picky, or is it an academic thing? What is the problem? I don't know. I'm very surprised, a suburban Chicago kid. It's really bizarre. I actually want to look back while we're sitting here talking about this. Did they really just sign one kid last year at receiver too?
Yep. Conberry Johnson last year, Eugene Hilton Jr. this year. They were after a couple bigger kids. Tunkara, the kid that was at Arizona and flipped. Vernon Allen. They were after a couple bigger kids, but it was one of my fly in the ointment things too, is you got to land more than one receiver. You just got to, even if it means you're taking a bit of a project where you're going to hopefully develop them. You need more than one guy in that room.
Yeah, and the kid last year is a slot. So, yeah, this is so in a 3 formation receiver set, over 2 years, they can't fill out a starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
We may have to change your job description to wide receiver recruiting coordinator, because this is not acceptable behavior.
Well, let me say this. The first year we talked, they did much better in the cornerback room, right? They elevated with Xavier Lucas, Agard. This year, defensive line. Maybe next year, they put all three of those together, and then we get the receivers. Because I do want to talk about that defensive line group you mentioned.
Oh, it's pretty good.
Jalen Williams is – well, listen, Jalen Williams is the guy everybody talks about, the guy they flipped from Michigan, 6'6", 260-pound. I want to kind of ping you on the two interior guys, Xavier Uponu and Drayden Pavey, who I feel like are kind of underrated.
I like the kid from Texas better because I think he moves laterally better, but Pavey is I don't know if I want to say earth mover, but an earth stopper. He's going to be able to take some double teams. You can play a little more two gap with him, and he could be a nose. But, I mean, you just don't find a lot of 300-pound defensive linemen walking around that are going to turn down Ohio State and Michigan to go to Wisconsin from the Midwest. And I don't think either one of those schools, he's a Cincinnati kid, had offers from either. He probably would have went, to be honest. So they're trying to get developmental kids like that. Heck, Notre Dame even took a kid like that from Miami in their class. It's just there aren't many 300-pounders with the academic profile for Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Stanford that you can get. So these are the kind of guys you take. But if you add the kid from Texas in, and I've met him, he's a good kid. He's kind of new to football. He's a boomer bust guy, but he's got more athleticism. And I think he could be a one gap, 3-tech or nose guard. He's a guy I could see working out at Wisconsin, because they want to get downhill in their 3-man line fronts predominantly. And they'll run some 4-man line and stuff. He could play 3-tech. That's the guy I'm most curious about. I'm pretty confident that Jay want to be a player. And I think they have enough talent overall on the edge. The kid they got from Gainesville, Florida is a steal. He's going to be a true pass rusher. He could be an outside linebacker or a true D-end, however they want to classify him. So that group is probably the best that I've seen. I think the edge from Florida and Jalen, those two kids, just off the top of my head, I don't think they redshirt. I think they will play.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. And the edge for Florida, in case people aren't paying attention, our following is Nicholas Clayton. So Clayton Williams, you think that's pretty likely chance those guys get in the field year one?
How many guys are like, would you say, or 220 and above at Wisconsin, but not too bulky and are twitchy and natural pass rushers? How many they got?
Like in the history or like right now?
Let's go right now.
I would say they've got a couple of freshmen from last year's class that have a chance, like Anelu Lafayette, Thomas Heiberger are guys, but nobody established is the point.
The kid from Florida is going to be the twitchiest guy in the room day one.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle the run, and I highly doubt he is. And he only might play in 6 or 7 games because he's going to probably get beat up a little bit, but he's going to run around a lot of guys. He's just white. But the 205 to 220-pound kid, here's a little note. Miami, Florida State. What did they do from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s? That's the kid they took, redshirt in the second year. You're like, who's that? And he had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss against you because your offensive tackle was too slow. That's the exact kid that he is. I was shocked they let him out of the state of Florida. So Wisconsin, that's the biggest steal in this class, hands down.
I want to hit you up on the quarterback in a sec. We're going to take a break for our friends of the show. But I want to ask Brian, what makes Carter Smith such a big get for the Badgers, and how could he slot in? And how long do you think Badger fans need to wait? Because that's not a year one guy. But I am curious what you think that timeline looks like on Carter Smith. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show. Over at our incredible friends over at Game Time. Game Time's the number one spot. Listen, college football playoffs are coming up. NBA's going on. College basketball's going on. There's a bunch of action right now. If you want tickets, head over to Game Time. And it doesn't have to be that. Go see Nelly. Nelly's going on a tour pretty soon. I grew up with Nelly. If you want to go see a concert, you want to go to an art expo, whatever it is, NASCAR, golf, it's all over there on Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Our great friends of the show. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Unlock tickets to do more in life. That's what we should all be doing a little bit more of this holiday season. This is also a great gift. Give somebody the tickets to go get some entertainment over at Game Time. Snake the tickets without the stress over at Game Time. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Okay, let's jump back in with Brian Smith, recruiting insider. Brian, talk to me about Carter Smith. The Badgers nab a quarterback late, 4-star kid. Where does he fit in? And how long do you think it'll take for him to get on the field?
Far as fit, he's a guy that can run the football. So in the spread, you got to be careful how you blitz him, your pass rush lanes and all that. So this is a little bit new for Wisconsin fans. He's a true athlete. He's also a little bit more physical than I thought, because like you meet him, he's a super nice kid, affluent family, comes from Fort Myers, went to a private school, the whole 9 yards. So he's lived a pretty good life. But on the football field, he's physical too. So he'll run RPO and run over somebody, which I don't suggest he try to do in the Big Ten Conference. But at the same time, he can run around them or make them miss. So as a passer, he will remind you of somebody that's played shortstop or whatever. He can throw it from different angles. Very loose frame in terms of like a slinky. Very naturally athletic and sidesteps well. Good pocket presence. Pretty good arm, but not like a cannon. But he's most importantly a field general that will understand time and circumstance. If he needs to get out of bounds, he will get out of bounds. If he needs to take a little more of a chance because of what time there is in the game and not hit the check down and take a chance, he'll throw it. He's going to be more of a coach on the field than what Wisconsin fans are used to. And that might be his most important trait. In the moment, big plays, Carter Smith can deliver, because his team had a few good players, but they weren't dominant. He carried his team because of his talent.
Well, let me ask you this. I got 3 kind of comps here. And I want to tell you where you think he fits into this. And these are the ceiling comps. If he hits his ceiling, these are 3 players that I've had people tell me. Carter Smith reminds me of one of these guys: Trace McSorley, JJ McCarthy, Max Duggan. Where do you think he potentially fits if he hits his ceiling among those guys? Or are those comps way off?
Yeah, McCarthy. I'm most familiar with him, so I would have to use him as a comp. JJ was a little more refined, but the high school he played at his senior year was none other than IMG Academy, because he transferred there because Illinois shut down football in the COVID year. Don't get me started on that. And so he transferred to IMG and he killed it. He immediately stepped in, was a leader. Personalities are similar in that regard. He didn't care if he handed off 20 times in a row or threw it 20 times in a row. Carter fits that. He would run if he has to, but I don't know if he's a better athlete running than Carter, but he got bigger and stronger too. Like Michigan's got a really good strength program. So what people think of with JJ as a sophomore, junior, that wasn't JJ coming out of high school. He had to add quite a bit of weight. He's a Chicago kid originally. But I think the moxie in the moment, like remember the game where Michigan upset Ohio State on the road? Everybody thought JJ didn't throw up much in that game. Well, when he did, he was money. That's Carter. So I think he can be a first-round draft pick if he puts in the time. Like JJ put in serious time in the weight room. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason he went, 10th overall or something like that? I forget what it was, but pretty high. I think Carter Smith has many of those traits. Now, Carter is not going to have the same skill talent to hand off to and throw to that Michigan did right away. But after a redshirt year, I could see him being the guy. And it wouldn't shock me if he was the starter before the end of this next season, because correct me if I'm wrong, the Badgers are not going after a portal quarter. Or
they will. Yeah, they have
to.
Okay.
Then it's interesting. I don't know how that'll work.
Yeah, they'll get a portal guy because Braden Locke just left. Tyler Van Dyke's been in the portal now.
Oh, Locke left? I did not know that.
Yeah, just today. Locke left today. Mabry's in the portal. Or not Mabry, sorry. Tyler Van Dyke left earlier. They basically have Mabry Medtoyer on the roster right now.
They have to take 2.
Yeah, they have to get 2. They got to get a couple arms. So they're going to get a guy for sure. We haven't really heard too much. Connor Wiegman is a name that had some smoke with the Badgers. There's a couple other guys.
He can run, and he's a bigger version of Carter Smith. And Wiegman was a 5-star.
Mm-hmm.
Just can't stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of like the kid that went to how do you say, Shaw, or what are the kid at Louisville? He was a kid that was an elite recruit to Oregon, couldn't stay healthy, transferred to Texas. That same kind of deal. But Wiegman, I've seen him play live. He throws a pretty ball and he's got some juice. It's just he's in his own head. So,
well, and he's faced SEC defenses. He has a good enough arm. He was a 5-star recruit. Like maybe it's a bit of a buy low there. But we'll see.
It depends on the NIL and all that, because it only takes one school to offer him a bag and Wisconsin's out. I have a story about that here in a minute. But this is a pretty wild time with the portal. I'll say that.
Let me ask you this to finish up on this recruiting class. You mentioned the offensive line. They brought in 5 bodies. They brought in 5 bodies last year. This feels like they've done a great job over 2 cycles of rebuilding that offensive line. Hardy Watts, Logan Powell, a bunch of big tackles in this class. Would you say maybe along with defensive line, is that your favorite spot that they addressed here? Or maybe it's quarterback. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, quarterback I don't count because it's only one player. Even if they'd assigned Bryce, who Michigan got, it's still one player. You got to look at groupings. It's apples to apples that way. Carter's the most important part because quarterback put that to the side. You could make an argument for defensive back because, again, their development has been good. Now, Mike Mickens is not on the staff. He's at Notre Dame, but it's still the same system and their evaluation tools. And these coaches talk with each other. They probably talk to Mickens. Who should we take? What can we get? Blah, blah, blah. And even one of the kids they got is from one of the schools Notre Dame recruits. Is that ironic? No. I really like the DB group because of the length and what their history is in this scheme of coaching them. So you could flip a coin for me on O-line DB.
Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. The Badgers announced the hire of Jeff Grimes, former offensive coordinator for Kansas, Baylor. What were your initial thoughts on that hire?
Well, number one, I had to look him up to make sure I had it correct on who he was. And I'm like, okay. It's a nice balance of what he's been able to do. He hasn't always been successful, but those are programs that year to year, man, it's random. Who is or who is not going to be there. So it's a little iffy, but like if you watched, and I can't remember the kid's name, who's the Kansas running back this year?
Oh, they got two.
He's good.
Yeah, it's
that was Jeff's guy, and they went from the beginning of the year like he was a good player, but at the end of the year, he's like, holy crap. This kid could play with Saban 2012. You know what I mean? Like he was downhill and he could catch the ball and he could block. He develops guys that are 3 stars. Which program does that sound like that you know?
Wisconsin and Iowa. Like it's too.
It's exactly right. But the key with him, and this is where it's interesting, and this is why Carter is so important. Jeff Fitz, Carter Smith. For the running backs that Wisconsin signed, and I like the Dupree kid, for instance, to get out of Chicago. This is going to be a sophomore next year. If you get him with Carter running option and RPO, they'll be fine. You're starting to get better O-linemen again. That's good. I still think they need to go to the portal and get one of those guys out of the portal as an O-lineman, which goes against everything Wisconsin stands for, but they don't have a first-round pick right now on the offensive line. To get to where they need to know in Jeff's offense, they need one of those. So they'll have to assess that. But by the way, a left tackle right now is going to cost you about 1.2. I'm sure you've got that in your spare change over there, Ryan. You can help Wisconsin out.
Yeah.
But
I'll dig through the couch.
It's crazy. Left tackle right now. And there's just none in the portal, really. The kid from Virginia Tech is, I guess, the hot name. But anyway, they need maybe one guy like that they can just run GT. And then all the stuff off of it that a mobile quarterback does, you're good. If they hadn't got Carter Smith and they'd have hired him, I'd have said, what are y'all doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because the kid that's at Kansas, and I guess he's coming back too. So good for them. He wasn't very highly rated. He's 6 foot, 6'1", but he makes 20 guys miss in space. I mean, he's annoying, and he's a pretty clutch player. So it sounds a lot like Carter Smith, and Carter is 6'2" at least. I think he'll end up being about 210, and he's a little more physical, I think, because he can be. He's a little bigger. I'd imagine this is a good fit. The only question I have, again, are they going to have the offensive lineman to really set? I'm shocked that Kansas at the end of this year, their O-line's better than Wisconsin's. What they did to Colorado in that game, I mean, they just deplanted any notion of anybody saying Wisconsin or Kansas was going to lose it. By halftime, that game was over. But that was his offense. And beginning of the year, Kansas stunk. They didn't do something right, but he fixed it. So that tells me he understands the psyche of college players in today's game. Wisconsin's probably not the most savvy conscience as an offense right now after the way they just got destroyed in big games. They need somebody to give them some confidence because there's more talent there than what they saw. Right. Big receiver. Who's the kid for Wisconsin that can really run? Big kid.
Anthony. He can fly.
That kid in this offense could be special. Now, teams are going to try to take him away, run cover 2, make you everything stay in front and do different things. But if Wisconsin has a mobile quarterback, then you're still in 2nd and 5 a lot because that quarterback's going to annoy you to death. Not many linebackers are going to tackle Carter one-on-one. So moving forward, I think it's good. It's just they got to get through this year. Mm-hmm. And since you said both the quarterbacks, like Mateer's the only guy there, I don't know if he wants to run that much. I didn't see him play live in high school. I just saw him play 7-on, but he's a big dude. Maybe he could be that guy. I don't know. That's a wild guy. I have no clue. But you still got to get 2 quarterbacks out of the portal because you can't trust a true freshman. Mateer, he hasn't really played. Has he played at all?
No, he got just a couple reps this year, but no, not really. He's green.
Okay. And then finally with that, I guess this is the point. Can you get that second quarterback, like I said, out of the portal so you have some balance and you bring these guys along slow? And if Carter overdevelops as far as his rate, that's great. But you really don't want to play him to his second year in any meaningful reps if you can get away with it.
Yeah, and especially with the schedule that they have coming up, I don't think you want to throw Carter Smith to the Wolves, which we're going to talk about in a second. The 2025 schedule has 2025 schedule has dropped. Brian has some thoughts about the Badger ceiling. We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. Quick second for the great FanDuel, the number one spot for all your sports betting needs, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of the NFL, the official sportsbook of Ryan Herrings. This is where I go to make all my bets, futures, parlays, teasers, spreads. It's all over there at FanDuel.com. Great time to do it. As always, do it responsibly, but spice up the weekend. NBA's going on. You have college football playoffs. What an incredible time if you want to lay a couple parlays down, if you have a good feel on some of these big games coming up. College basketball, great time. And NFL Plus will be coming up too. Excellent time to spice up your sports weekend over at FanDuel. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, let's talk 2025 schedules. Let's talk a little bit about the release of this. So I'm going to very quickly see if I can share my screen here, and we'll just put it up. So everybody, if you're watching on the YouTube, you can see it. Brian, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand as well. Do you want to just kind of go game by game, or do you want to just do initial impressions here?
I'll do both. Initial impressions is they weren't not given an easy slate, but they chose to play Alabama too, which I respect from the Wisconsin brass. They didn't have to do that. Game by game, I mean, Miami of Ohio is arguably the best program in the MAC. So starting out, if you screw around, you can lose. But they lost a bunch of guys, and their 2 receivers that are good are in the portal. You're probably not going to get the best version of Miami. Then you play Middle Tennessee. I have no idea what they have, but they probably got a bunch of SEC kids as transfers. So that's a little worrisome. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess the Alabama game on the road week 3 shall not go well. Sue me, but that's done. What do they lose? 1 game every 3 years at home? So.
Yeah. So that 2-1 now, like we'll say 2-1. Then you get Maryland at home.
But then the rest, this is the first thing. Once you start the Big Ten, and I just looked at this from a holistic perspective, everybody else on the schedule, and I'll name them, the only program, and it's the first one, that I think Wisconsin has a better program than right now is Maryland. It goes Maryland, Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota. All the other ones have been more successful in the last 2 years than Wisconsin. That is not a friendly slate. However, you duly noted before the show, Iowa loses a ton. I highly doubt Minnesota is going to be as good as they were this year next season. Kind of the same thing with Illinois, but Bielema, obviously, you guys know, is a good coach. Yep. And he takes the Wisconsin game very seriously for obvious reasons. It'll be in Madison, but like they're going to be an underdog in over half their Big Ten games. So I think 6-6, 7-5 is kind of where they're at next season because of the schedule, the Bama game, and Lord only knows what's going to happen at quarterback for Wisconsin. So I'm a glass half empty guy. You got to prove it to me. So until they get a quarterback, I think their ceiling like is 7-5. What do you think?
As the ceiling, yeah, no, I think that is the ceiling. I think that's the ceiling. And if you don't hit on a couple things this offseason, namely quarterback, that ceiling could be unrealistic. If we're being honest.
They could be 5-7 in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Because listen, I think Iowa's going to be worse next year. They lose a ton. I think Indiana's obviously going to be, they're going to take a step back, Indiana.
Sure.
But Michigan's going to be better. Like Michigan is going to be better next year. I think Washington's going to be better next year. So for some of these teams dropping down, you're not going to get that version of Michigan's offense next year. We were talking about quarterback before the show. What do Badger fans who maybe don't follow other teams recruiting really closely have to look forward to with that Michigan game, Brian?
Well, if you haven't heard the name Bryce Underwood yet, You soon will. I know Cam Newton. I followed him through his college career, been around him numerous times here recently with 7-on-7 tournaments and stuff like that. And he still looks like he can play. He's yoked. There's one Cam. Okay, there's one Cam Newton. He's 6'6", 255 and yoked. Bryce Underwood is 6'3.5", 6'4" at least, if not 6'5", has a cannon. There was a game earlier this year in a 7-on. He went 21 for 22. He's rather accurate, and he's a freak of nature. He just got, $10 million to go to Michigan or something like that? Y'all think Michigan's down? That's about to end. So that's about to end. So with that being stated, there is no friendly game for them early in the slate of the Big Ten because even Maryland has talent. They should beat Maryland, but should they? Their quarterback, I don't know if he's coming back, but they would at least have an experienced quarterback if he has another year left. Name the team on the schedule. You go, okay, that's a sure win in the Big Ten.
There is none anymore. There used to be 4 or 5 for Wisconsin. There used to be Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern. Oh, never Northwestern. They always give us. But the point is there used to be on every year's schedule, Brian, there used to be 4 or 5. You'd circle and say, well, those are wins, 100%. Now it's a bunch of coin toss games. Minnesota's a coin toss. Indiana's a coin toss. And your side of the coin, it probably isn't even 50-50 on some of these games, unfortunately.
No, it's really not. That's the thing. Like Maryland will have better athletes overall outside the numbers than Wisconsin, if I had to guess. That'd be my guess. Now their line play and their coaching, I'm not so sure about. But after that, like you're not going to outcoach Cignetti. That ain't gonna happen. You got the game at the end there against Minnesota. I know you hate him, but he's a pretty good coach.
Yeah.
And he is. I mean, he should have beat Penn State. He screwed that up. But Illinois got a really good coach. Washington, Jeff Fish is a good coach. Oregon speaks for itself. Like, where's the game you go, okay, this is going to be easy. Oh, we got Ohio State and Iowa the week before. Every week, Wisconsin's going to be an underdog. They could be 4-8 next year if the injuries go against them in key spots. Receiver, DB, D-line. Those are the 3 spots Wisconsin always struggles to recruit the most. We know that. If they have a bad year at any of those spots injury-wise, they could be the team that loses all the close games that are one score. There's always that team every year in the Big Ten, like they can't get over the hump. Maybe it's Wisconsin next year because the schedule is freaking brutal.
Let me ask you this, and I want to finish on this. So this is the last year where they have, well, not the last year, but the next year the schedule eases up. I think they just have 1 or 2 of the big boys instead of 3 or 4 of them. The schedule eases up in 26. Those younger classes that Fickle brought in, that 24 class, that 25 class, who have both been top 25-ish classes at Wisconsin, Carter Smith, the young talent is coming. The schedule eases up. What does it mean to survive 2025? You mentioned earlier, they just got to survive 2025. What does that mean to you?
That means they show progress, especially in those 3 spots. D-line, I think there should be reason to believe that. Very concerned about receiver. DB, there's promise, but we need to see it. So until Wisconsin can man up against upper echelon Big Ten teams on the corner, at least half the field and play half man, half zone, I'm not comfortable with saying that's a team that's going to get above 7 wins again. I know Wisconsin fans want to hear Rose Bowl and all that. I'm not sure the next 10 years they're going to win 9 games in a season because of how much harder the Big Ten is now. I know none of them want to hear that, but I'm not going to lie to you. Like, your recruiting has to change exponentially now at receiver. Again, your point earlier about 2 receivers and 2, that is just horrific. This is the passing air. What are we doing? So they're going to have to throw down some major bread at quarterback and receiver to go 500 next year.
Mm-hmm.
So survive next year, show some promise, and say, hey, we got Carter. They need to find a way, the more I think about it, for Carter to play next year. And that's the rough thing, because they got to show promise in recruiting, because if you get like a 1-year quarterback, it doesn't help you in recruiting. So I don't know what you do there. They might just say, screw it, take a good quarterback. Like, I think Wegman's got 2 years. Let's use him. Hey, he's going to have a few rough patches this year, but this is a former 5-star. Behind him, we got Carter Smith. We'll be good. That might be the way I go, because you could probably help recruiting better and possibly even pay a little less going that route.
And then finally, maybe build some continuity at that spot where you're not getting
they got to
every year, because that's been the issue, right? Every single year, it's go to the portal, find a new quarterback, go to the portal, find a new quarterback. It's just like, at some point, man, it just doesn't work, because you're not getting Cam Ward. You're not getting the top of the guys.
I've said it on your show numerous times. There's no friendly here. You have to overspend to win. That is not the Wisconsin state legislature. They don't like that stuff. The university doesn't work that way. And then I'm assuming there's some booster for Wisconsin. I'm sure you know who it is that wants to do it. I don't know if they don't want to go that route or what it is. At some point, you're going to have to overpay. You don't have to do what they do with Bryce at Michigan. They got Dave runs Barstool or whatever is the boost. That's different. He's kind of like having, Phil Knight at night, for Oregon. It's the same thing. But they need to be able to go out and spend $5 million on the number one player at X, the number one left tackle, the number one whatever, to show the program is serious about trying to be a Big Ten contender. Because right now, they're just trying to be 500. That's it.
Yeah, great stuff as always from Brian Smith. Appreciate you guys tuning in. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten and the Locked On College Football Network for all the latest stories, both college football and in the conference. Thank you so much on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.